My name is Maria Torres. I am a social worker with the InHome Supportive Services Division. I'm currently assigned to Quality Assurance. We just kind of go behind the social workers and just make sure that, that their cases were correct. I'll talk to you guys a little bit about the InHome Supportive Services application process, and then what services we could potentially provide to any applicants. Can you go to the next slide, please? The IHSS overview, InHome Supportive Services provides assistance to eligible individuals who are age blind or disabled and who are unable to remain safely in their home without assistance. IHSS is an alternative out-of-home care, and we are currently serving a little over 10,000 recipients here in Kern County alone. Our caseload and cases have just grown so much within the last couple years. The IHSS eligibility criteria. You do have to be a California resident. We do have recipients who move from county to county within the state of California, and that's okay. We could transfer the case. It's just non-transferable from one state to the other. If they're currently living here and move to LA County, which I know is really close to Fraser Park, then we can transfer those cases over. Applicants do have to be living in their own home. Their own home could be, living on their own. They could be living with a family member, someone that's caring for them. It just can't be like a boarding care, a long-term care facility, rehabilitation, or a hospital. They do have to be living, in their own home. They do have to be considered at risk of out-of-home placement. And then an SOC 873, which is a healthcare certification form, does also have to verify the need for that recipient. And then they must also be eligible or receiving Medi-Cal benefits. We do get a lot of applicants or a lot of people who are hesitant to apply for a program because they don't have Medi-Cal. We still encourage those those individuals to apply for a program because our referral line actually takes care of applying for Medi-Cal for them. They just obviously have to continue with that application process and then of course be eligible for Medi-Cal. Unfortunately, the program is only Medi-Cal funded, so they do have to eventually be eligible for Medi-Cal to be eligible for the program. Next slide, please. The IHSS application process. So the easiest way, they would just call the referral line, which is the 868-1003. Anybody can place a referral for any individual. You can place it for yourself or a family member, a friend, anybody that you know that may be in need or out of home or at risk of out-of-home placement. You just need to have their basic information, name, social address, date of birth. That way the social worker, that way an application can get created for them and the social worker has good contact information to contact them and follow through with that application process. At the time of that the application is placed, a healthcare certification form is mailed out. This form does have to be completed by a doctor, healthcare licensed professional. Here we get a lot of questions with who can fill out the form. We honestly just say any doctor that's aware of the need that the individual may have or is most likely to recommend them for services. After we get that healthcare certification form back, that usually is time sensitive, so they do have to get that to us within 45 days. An intake assessment is completed by the social worker. So the social worker will either go out to the home or do a video conference. Because of COVID right now, we are taking those precautions. So we do ask some COVID related questions just to make sure that, the recipient hasn't tested positive for COVID-19 or been exposed or experiencing any symptoms. And then if it's no all the way through, then we'll go ahead and schedule an in-person home visit so we can further assess those needs. So anywhere from domestic care to personal care needs. After that home visit, then we will send out a notice of action, which is just a letter in the mail, basically letting them know if they were approved for services or denied for services. If they were approved, they'll get a monthly amount of how many services and what areas they were approved for. And then after that, they're typically just yearly reassessments, unless there's like a drastic change to their condition, then we'll go ahead and do a change assessment whenever that happens. But for the most part, it's just yearly reassessments that we're conducting. Next slide, please. And then the in-home supportive services that we typically cover are personal care. So anywhere from like respiration, feeding, bowel and bladder care, dressing, bathing, to domestic and related care, such as housework, meal preparation, cleanup, after meals, laundry, shopping, or errands. We do authorize accompaniment to medical appointments. So if recipient is unable to safely get to the medical appointments on their own, or be at the appointments on their own, then we'll authorize time for someone to get paid to take them there. Paramedical services, so like wound care, diabetic care, with permissions or documentation from the doctor, and then protective supervision is another service that we also authorize. And we assess all of this at our initial assessment. Next slide, please. Other resources that we have here is our HICAP department. It's our health insurance counseling and advocacy program. They do assist with the Medicare share of cost. So we do have some recipients or applicants who have a share of cost. Depending on their share of cost, we can refer them over to our HICAP department, and they will be able to assist them with any like supplemental insurance to help them get supplemental insurance to help lower that share of cost, so then they are eligible for in-home supportive services without having to pay anything out of pocket. We do have our information and referral line, INR, and they provide countywide resources. Their phone number is the 868-1000. And then right now, because of COVID, it is typically appointments only.
Okay, so this is where I'm going to go ahead and take over. My name is Janet. I work for the IHSS Public Authority Department. So basically, we are the ones that process the applications for the providers. So they do have to submit their separate application. What that looks like is basically they do have to go online. They do have to create an account, watch a couple of videos, and then schedule their in-person orientation. We don't unfortunately have anything in Fraser Park. So their options would either be Bakersfield, Taft, or Lake Isabella, but I believe Bakersfield is a little bit closer. So basically what we do is orientations, we determine eligibility. We do have a registry for our providers that are able to work or willing to work or looking for employment. So that's going to be also a very good resource for you guys. We do also manage their workers' compensation in case there is any type of accidents, and we do their verifications of employment. If I can see the next slide, please. Okay, so this is a quick rundown as to how to become a care provider. This is the website. It is a little bit long, so what I always tell our providers that call in, you can Google Kern County IHSS. That's the fastest way. You would go onto the website. This is a breakdown of how to get to the specific website called Riva. We'll try to send an email. So we'll try to send, when they do call in, we'll try to send them an email with the link, with the instructions, so that they're able to navigate through the page, because it is a little bit difficult to find. But once you get onto the Riva website, again, you watch the 9 enrollment videos. It has most of the information on the program in those videos. Due to COVID, again, it has been changed. Before, the orientation was about 3 hours. But now we have those videos online, so most of the information is there. We will recap during the orientation, but we won't go into detail as much as the the videos themselves. So we always tell them, always make sure to save your login information. You can log back in, watch those videos. And for the orientation, the providers or potential providers are required to bring in their ID and social security card, because it is one of the state requirements. We would have to see the physical copies, scan them in, and so on. And if I could see the next slide, please. So the approval process goes like this. Once the client, the provider has already done their videos, they will go ahead and come into the office, have their orientation done. They'll speak to our providers union. They'll also have a recap of the information that they learned. They will sign our county specific documents. And then after that, we will intake their IDs and socials. Once they have been approved, typically we like to tell them that it takes about 3 weeks. So in an ideal situation, they would come into the orientation. We give them the information about the background check. For the background checks, we always try to specify and make sure that they understand that they do have to use the form that's specific to our agency. So the way that the Department of Justice works is they have designated a special mailing code so that we can receive the results directly through our electronic DOJ portal. So it is very important that they take our form so that we can receive the results. If they accidentally take another form, then we would have to have them rescan, and they would have to pay another $52 out of pocket. So we try to stress it as much as we can to make sure to go ahead and use our form. Again, once they have completed all the checks, which is orientation, coming into the office, doing their live scan, then we have to verify their socials, enter them into the system, and in about 3 weeks, they will receive an approval letter if approved. The only reason that they would not be approved is if, one, their process is incomplete, or two, if they have a tier 1 or tier 2 crimes. And then we go over that through the videos. But again, it would just be some specific violent felonies, or 3 other felonies, which would include elder abuse, child abuse, or medical fraud, since this is a medical funded program. Now here we do have information about the registry. So again, what the registry is basically we have a system where providers that are looking for employment, they will call us, they will request an application, they will break down the services that they're willing to provide, the areas that they're willing to go to, and the timeframes in which they're looking for. So once we have that application completed, the provider does have to do monthly check-ins. They'll let us know we are interested in working for this month. So when we do have a client who is in need of a provider, they will contact Public Authority. We will go ahead and process the request. We'll send them a list of 10 providers. Those 10 providers do have to be interviewed by the client. And then once they find the provider that is best fit to them, they can go ahead and be linked to them through the SIP team, which is kind of like the middle person between the IHSS side and the Public Authority side, which deals with the providers. So if I can see the next slide, please. Again, all of our providers are covered under workers' compensation. So in the event of any type of accident, we do let them know that it's very important for them to contact us. We will submit a claim for them. We will have our workers' compensation company contact them. We'll give them the documentation for them to be able to see a doctor and be able to get some medical assistance. Again, we understand it's a very difficult job. They do sometimes have to lift the clients, things happen, and our providers may get hurt. So when that does happen, they are covered under workers' compensation. They do have to contact Public Authority, and then we will go ahead and follow up with them. And if I could see the next slide. And then the last thing is we are also in charge of the verification of employment. So a lot of times when our providers either need information regarding their income for DHS or for any type of loan, for mortgages, things like that, they do have to send in a verification of employment via fax. And this is the number 661-493-2074. We are also in charge of completing those verifications of employment. So we always let them know if anything, if you guys do need those type of things, it would not go to HR because this is the county is not technically considered their employer, so they do reference back to public authority. We'll send them the information requested. Did anyone have any questions?
I did have a question. I'm trying to remember the exact term. It was during Maria's part. It was protective supervision. Was that one of the possible things? And I was just curious a little bit more about that. You know, I understood like the domestic, you know, all those different categories, but tell me a little bit about protective supervision and what that was.
So protective supervision is a little more complex. It is for individuals who have some kind of cognitive memory impairment and who are not aware of self-dangerous behavior. So, you know, this could be a minor, it could be an elder with dementia, Alzheimer's, who is engaging in self-harming behavior. So we authorize time for someone to basically, you know, watch them, provide that supervision so they don't engage in any self-harming behaviors. We do assess everybody for, like I said, this specific task is just a little more complex because, you know, we just go really deep into that assessment when it comes to someone with a cognitive or mental impairment. Did that help a little bit?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was thinking along those lines, but just wanted to make sure I understood. Thank you. Yeah, other questions, Chelsea?
The question. So with that form, when somebody is getting set up to get IHSS, that SOC 873 healthcare form, is that the only form, or do they get a packet that comes in the mail for them to fill out?
They'll get a very small packet. It'll just have like an introduction letter. It'll have the SOC 873, the healthcare certification form, and then the SOC 874, that one just kind of gives instructions on how to fill it out, who can fill it out, and then the due date on the form. But they only have to turn that form in to kind of get the program going. If we need, you know, alternative documentation for like protective supervision or paramedical services, which is like wound care, diabetic care, then we'll ask for that. But that won't necessarily stop the services from us continuing with our application process. We just can't move forward with our application process without that healthcare certification form.
Okay, so that leads to the next question is, I know the doctor here, Jesse, who he will complete the form, like the doctor's version of it, and he'll give it to clients. And then we had clients show up here with that already done form. So let's say that happens. Do they need to go through the referral process, or could we send that in and that would be kind of the start of the referral process?
So you guys can call it in. Like I said, we initiate one just because it kind of starts that timer of, you know, those 45 days. But, you know, it doesn't have to be necessarily issued by us. So as long as it's the correct form that's being completed, then we'll accept it.
Awesome. Okay.
Prior or before, and signed within 60 days. If it's so, like if the doctor signs it and then the application process isn't started till 3 months later, we wouldn't be able to take it. It has to be within 60 days of the doctor's signature.
Okay.
Did anyone else have any questions? I don't see anything. So thank you so much. That was really valuable information. Like I said, just a lot of like questions around this coming from different people in the community. So I appreciate that. Before we jump into our next presentation from GBLA on fair housing, I saw a few people jump on. And so we had people who hadn't joined us yet this year, or this is your first time. Introduce yourselves. So I'd love to just catch some of the people that joined us that hadn't joined before. And in particular, I see Michael McNellis that you're here. And I don't know if you are able to jump in, but we've had some questions recently about TK and whether the deadlines for that are, the age requirements for that are changing. So if you're able to jump on, I'd love to have you introduce yourself.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, it's nice to see you all this morning. Yes, I'm in the process of, we're actually putting a plan together for our TK program. Hopefully that it's going to increase our numbers. In terms of the age window is changing. So I believe it's from, I have to go back in my notes, but I believe, and I know Sarah's on here, but I think it's September 2nd through, I want to say March 2nd. So it's, the window has changed. It's earlier now. So we actually will be doing, and hopefully a TK and kindergarten roundup this year so that we can get more kids into the program.
Okay, great. So Michael McNellis is the principal of our of Fraser Park Elementary. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing that. So yeah, we'll look for more information on that to, you know, get some of the families that we're working with to have kids in that range and make sure they're hooked in and understand those changes to that program. The reason why I knew that there were changes is that I actually have a kid that I thought wouldn't meet TK, and then suddenly a week ago found out, oh, it's changed. She does actually qualify.
Yeah.
So.
And we're going to be advertising for it as well in the newspaper so that people are aware of it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, was there anyone else who, this is your first time joining us in 2022 and you wanted to jump in and introduce yourself? All right. Well, if we don't have anyone else that wants to introduce themselves right now, we will have our partner share time at the end as well. If there's any events or upcoming partner updates that you want to share, but we'll jump into our presentation from GBLA about fair housing.
Good morning, everyone. So let me see if I can share my screen here. Does it look okay? I can't see from here.
Yes, it looks great.
Great. So my name is Oakley Trin. I work for GBLA for the last few years for on specifically fair housing. Today we'll discuss the what fair housing is, who's protected, what conducts are illegal, and a little bit about the Fair Housing Law Project. Of course, I'm not going to dive too deep into any one of these. I'm just going to give a few examples here and there. For like more in-depth conversations about this, this coming month of April is Fair Housing Month, and our office is going to have it's going to hold a conference, a fair housing conference specifically, and we'll have maybe a little more than a handful of speakers come and speak once a week for about an hour on a specific aspect of fair housing. So I'll let Cassie talk about that a little more after the presentation. But right now, let's just jump right into it. What is fair housing? It's essentially the idea that if you want housing, if anyone wants housing, they should not be discriminated based on their protected class or their membership to a protected class. Everyone should have an equal opportunity at housing. And essentially federal and state laws make it illegal to discriminate against buyers, against renters, in-place residents. It can extend beyond to mortgages and insurance. So since I've mentioned protected classes, what are those protected classes? So the protected classes include race, color, national origin, and religion, which are federally protected. Later on in the 1970s, sex was added, disability and familial status were both also added to the federal protections. On the state side, of course, we have sexual orientation, marital status, ancestry. In source of income, there were some changes made in 2020 where housing vouchers. That includes like Section 8 vouchers or disability, SSI. You know, if your source of income comes in a certain way and that property is not, you know, considering that as income, so that you can rent the location, that is now, you know, something to be aware of, that, you know, source of income is now protected under state. There's of course gender identity, gender expression. There was also recent movement in the federal area for those. We're protected here in the state of California, but on the federal level, that is now listed under the sex category, under sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression. Of course, there's age, can't prefer people that are like single over married couples. There's arbitrary physical characteristics, which includes things like physical appearances, like, you know, if you have a lot of tattoos, if you have a lot of piercings, things of that nature. You know, those physical things have no bearing on your ability to pay rent or be a good tenant. So, you know, being discriminated just the way because of the way you look is, you know, not a, you know, also protected. So the next slide is basically, you know, a list of, you know, prohibited conduct that I could think of at the time. That includes trying to steer people into certain.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm only seeing the first slide. I don't know if we're seeing.
Oh, shoot. I am so sorry.
Oh, no worries. I just didn't want you to get too far in and just realize we
Okay.
should have been seeing different slides.
Yeah. Okay, what is fair housing? I mentioned that. Okay, so here are the protected classes. I'll just give you guys a moment to take a look at them. Okay. And then these are the prohibited conduct. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, so steering into certain neighborhoods or development in history, we've had you know, issues with redlining, and this is kind of, you know, the next phase of it, where people are, you know, being steered into certain neighborhoods or steered into certain parts of the building. Other things are providing false and misleading information to housing seeker. So, you know, if you or I go in to inquire about renting or buying a location and they said that housing is now unavailable because, you know, it's been rented out, for example, we would walk away and not know that, you know, we were just subtly discriminated against, because the next person that walked in, they said, oh yeah, it's available, it's not a big deal, because maybe that person may be more an ideal candidate in their eyes. So with, you know, little misleading informations in that manner, you can also discriminate against someone. It also prohibits discrimination with sexual harassment, advertising discriminatory statements. If you're asserting your fair housing rights and then the landlord retaliates against you and give you a 60-day notice for educating the landlord that you know, what they're doing is wrong, that is also prohibited conduct. Let's say a gay tenant is being harassed by other tenants in the housing area, because of their sexual orientation, but the landlord refuses to do anything about it. The liability for violating fair housing laws does flow up the chain, and the owner is liable for unlawful conduct acts that were done by the management company, the on-site manager, or the contractor, etc. So those at the top of the chain does have a duty to supervise. Other things to consider are like, you know, just outright telling people that, you know, they don't belong here, or they don't rent to people on welfare or disability, or, you know, even subtly saying, oh, you wouldn't like to live in this neighborhood, things of that nature, where you're trying to influence the person's decision to live based on their race or their disability or their ethnicity. So moving on, I'm going to speak a little bit about sex discrimination. Of course, there's generic sex discrimination, where you get differential treatment of in-place tenants or different standards for different housing seeker based on their sex. And then there's sexual harassment. So, if you're providing if there's a hostile environment, that has to do with sexual harassment, federal courts have recognized that sexual harassment in housing is more egregious than sexual harassment in the workplace. And a lot of time you hear about sexual harassment in the workplace, it's in the news a lot more, but when it occurs at work, at least you can remove yourself from that place, whether at the end of the day or at that moment. But when it's happening within your, where you consider a safe haven, your home, and that's where you're supposed to escape from the troubles of the day, and it's occurring there. This is why the courts have found it to be a lot worse than it is in the workplace. So yeah, when it's happening at home, a woman can feel distress and often feel like immobile, which is a problem. Of course, there's also domestic and sexual violence. We have a different unit that's specifically focused on domestic violence, but I'm not going to go too deep into that. There are legal protections that have underlying themes where survivors should not be evicted or denied housing for the reasons related to abuse against them. Now, moving on to reasonable accommodation. This has to do with, disabilities. If you have a mental disability or a physical disability, the landlords are required to make necessary reasonable accommodation. That includes things like accessibility to parking spaces, mailboxes. It could be, providing, rental payment reminders, or if someone gets their rent on the 3rd of the month because that's when their disability checks come in or something of that nature. And the 1st of the month is when you're supposed to pay rent. And it's reasonable enough for the landlord to move that date just so that to accommodate the person with a physical or mental disability rental payments. Other things include things like if you need a service animal or an emotional support animal to live normally, that is something that you can waive the no pet policy or pet deposit. So a service animal, of course, is a dog that's trained to do work and perform tasks for a person with disability to mitigate that disability. While an emotional support animal alleviates one or more of those identified symptoms or effects of the person's disability. Those emotional support animals don't actually need to be trained. They're there just for emotional support. Other things to look at with reasonable accommodation would be if a person has a mental illness, it's reasonable to accommodate by overlooking the unusual behavior of the person, as long as it's not a direct threat to people. Moving to reasonable modification. So
the slides aren't turning again, just so you know.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Okay. So reasonable modifications are, when the landlord, when you want to install things like accessibility, wheelchair ramps, grab bars, widening doors. These are more significant modifications to the unit. It's not something that, it can be sort of a financial burden a little bit on the owner or the landlord. So when it comes to reasonable modifications, The landlord are still required to allow these necessary modifications, but tenants usually have to pay for these modifications. Of course, there are exceptions. There are government funds that specifically handles reasonable modifications. Yeah, so for example, in public housing, they usually have a pool specifically for that. Okay. Of course, with fair housing laws, just like any other laws, there are exceptions and exemptions, and judges does interpret these laws in different ways over the years. So, you know, with housing discrimination claims or complaints that comes in, we address it on a case-to-case basis. So every person is unique, every situation is unique. What you want to do is, you know, contact our office, and we will look over and review the case and see how we can help you assert your legal rights. I'll provide that that contact at the end of the slides. Okay, so the Fair Housing Law Project. So it's a project run by GBLA. There are 3 components to the project. The first is you know, educating the community and providing outreach. You know, holding a fair housing conference annually, things of that nature. Just making sure that people understand their fair housing rights in the community. The second component to the project is investigations. So if there are if there's a complaint that comes in about a specific landlord or a specific property, we would you know, listen to that case and do an investigation on that particular property. What we would do there is we have volunteers essentially kind of do this like secret shopper duty. They go into housing, inquire about renting or buying a location, and writing about their experiences on how they're being treated. We send in enough people to look at the differences that certain people are being treated and seeing if there's potential discrimination in those cases. So having a large pool of volunteers that specifically wants to do these type of like social justice work, it's really important. So if you or someone that you know or someone within your network may be interested in volunteering with us, I highly recommend you contact our office, or I'll provide a flyer that specifically you can send out and have whoever wants to volunteer contact our office. The third component, of course, is enforcement services. We do have 3 attorneys on staff specifically, specializing in fair housing cases, and they handle things from advocacy with landlords to filing complaints with HUD and DFEH to litigation. If there's any questions, I am more than willing to take them right now. I left the contact information up at the end here.
I don't see the contact up with.
Oh, geez. There we go. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? If there are no questions, I will pass the baton over to Cassie to talk about the Fair Housing Conference and other updates.
Yeah, so as Oakley was mentioning over here at GBLA, we are hosting our 9th annual Fair Housing Conference next month. We do this in collaboration with National Fair Housing Month. So this year will be a virtual series. We will host this at 10 a.m. every Wednesday through the month of April. We have several guest speakers that will be in attendance. Our first session will be with our GBLA attorneys in our Fair Housing Law Project, where they're going to go over a little bit more in depth than what Oakley went in today. So it'll be a bit more about Fair Housing 101 is what the theme is. And it'll go over a bit more in depth about the services that we offer and the types of situations and cases that we've taken. Our second session is called More Than Words, and we're actually going to have a speaker from Kern County, City of Bakersfield, and Housing Authority, who will each share information about what we're doing for the community to increase affordable housing options. As we all know, the lack of housing exasperates housing discrimination, and so more affordable solutions and creating more ways to get people in will reduce the discrimination that is occurring. Our third session, we're going to have guest speakers from Suffolk University and the University of Boston, and they're going to go over the history of redlining and how we've gotten to where we are today. So, there was a lot of redlining that occurred in our past, which is what led us to creating fair housing laws. And there actually is still redlining occurring today. It's just a bit more incognito. So they'll go over the history of what redlining was and how to recognize it in situations today. And then on our final presentation, we're going to have Chris Brancart, who has more than 30 years experience in fair housing law. And he'll just kind of share some information about how it's changed over the years and how we've gotten to where we are today, with a focus on where California has gotten in terms of our protected categories. So a lot of great stuff, a lot of great speakers. I'll drop the flyer into the chat box. You can register for all 4 sessions or just one in particular, and they will also be recorded and posted to our social media pages. So we look forward to that. And then we're also going to have, we have our new third Thursday with GBLA that we launched this year. And so April 21st will be our third Thursday. We'll also focus on the Fair Housing Law Project, where you can actually invite your clients to come in, and it's free and open to the public. And it's open to the community so that they have an opportunity to come in and ask more direct questions and go over particular scenarios. If they're not sure they're being discriminated against, that would be a great time to attend and kind of share the information and hear back from our attorneys. So a lot of great stuff going on over here at GBLA. We have a whole lot of other services. So fair housing is just one small component of what we do. If your agency would like more information about any of our services, I'm always open for a general overview presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oakley and Cassie. That was great information. And yeah, that your conference sounds really interesting. So thank you for sharing about that as well. Were there any other questions for GBLA on fair housing or their upcoming events? All right, well, I saw some people start dropping some things in the chat. Oh, the fair housing, thank you so much, Cassie. So she just put the flyer for their fair housing conference into the chat. Robin dropped something in the chat about TK. So did you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Community Connection for Childcare partnered up with Megan Gratona, and she's going to be doing an informational parent meeting on the UTK and the UPK. And everybody who attends, because we're only doing 40 participants. So everybody who attends gets 2 game boards. So on the flyer, there's a link that you can register. So it's automatically on the flyer. So if you just open it up and click the link, you can register, and it will be through Zoom. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, like I said, that's been something that we've had questions about with our parents, how to direct them related to the changes to TK. So that sounds like really important informational session. So who else would like to jump in? I have a few updates from Paula De La Riva at First Five, who had to leave early. But let's start with any updates any upcoming events that partners want to share. You can drop things into the chat, or you can jump on and share some of that. Well, let me share a few things that Paula with First Five Kern, she had to get going. The biggest thing that they have going on is next week is their ACEs conference. So if you're not familiar with ACEs, this is a great time to learn about ACEs. It's adverse childhood experiences, and it affects lifelong health, and they're trying to pull together as many people in Kern County as possible to think about how to address this on a countywide level. So, and it's a free conference, open to anyone. And so I put the link there in the chat. And And then let's see, she also shared about First Five having community support funds that are available year-round, where agencies can request some support from First Five for specific community events. So those are a couple of things that First Five wanted me to pass along. Now, Paku, did you want to jump in and share a little bit about your Lunch and Learn?
Sure. Thank you. Every third Thursday, we do a lunch and learn, and we're starting to partner up with agencies. So if anybody would like to partner with us for upcoming lunches and learns, please feel free to email me. I shared my contact earlier, but the next one is going to be April 21st. And so people just log in. If you're not doing anything during lunch, feel free to log in, find out what's happening with us and our partner agency for that month. And again, like I said, we're also looking for agencies to partner up with us at our lunch and learns. So I shared the flyer, and then I'll be sharing the chat in case anybody, or not the chat, but the Zoom logins in case anybody wants to save the chat. They can have it, pull it up later. Thank you, Lindsay.
Great, thanks. All right, I'm going to put a couple things in the chat. One is Know Your Numbers program that's going to be kicking off at the library April 14th. And this is an opportunity for our community to come and do some health focused things. They're going to do some like baseline health screenings. Then it's have a series of classes, and then do a health screening at the end of this I believe 6 or 7 week process. So we wanted to help spread the word about that. And the public health is going to be coming up to do those classes at the library. And then we also, next week, the Kern County Children's Dental Network is going to be up here. We still have a few slots for dental screenings in the afternoon at the MCFRC. They're also going to be at the elementary school in the morning. So that's for kids 0 to 5. And it can be families TK kinder dental screening. They have the forms to do that. So wanted to spread the word about that as well. Were there any other announcements or events or things that you guys wanted to share? So I just shared the
question. I have a quick question for Robin. Robin, can that flyer be sent home for parents for that Zoom for UPK and UTK?
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead and send it out. But once we hit the 40 participants, we won't be taking any more.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
No problem.
Great. Any other events or even questions? I know we had a few people that popped in that are new to the collaborative meeting. So if there's any questions or anything else that anyone wanted to share. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was really good information, definitely for my team to learn about and be more familiar with. And just appreciate all of our partners' participation and helping us spread the information around to strengthen the community. So thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah, thanks, BJ. It's good to see you.